Hey everyone, this is Mr. K, and today we're going to go over the 7th part of the Precalculus summer homework, simplifying rationals. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. The first way that I like to start with is, I'm going to pretend like that, well not pretend, it is like x to the 1 power. And so what I always do is I always subtract those exponents. Whenever you're dividing, you would subtract the exponents, and so 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Whenever you have a negative exponent, you can just make it positive and put it in the denominator, and vice versa. If you had a negative exponent in the denominator, you can just make it positive and move it up to the numerator. So this would simplify to 3x to the negative 1, which is the same thing as 3 over x. Now that's the simplified version. It also says to state any restrictions, so one thing we need to keep in mind is that because x is in the denominator, we also need to state that x cannot equal 0. That is important because you can't divide by 0. For the next couple, we're going to have to do some factoring. If you need some help with factoring, I have a previous video that you can look for. So the first thing I'm going to do is factor out the x in the numerator, and so we'll have x, and then you'd be left with x plus 3. And a way to double check again your factoring, just distribute or FOIL or multiply them out, and you should get back to where you started. And then I'm going to divide that by 4x, and now I see that I have an x in the top and an x in the bottom. Now I can cancel those out. Sometimes what students like to do is they like to go ahead and say, okay, well I have an x here, I can cancel that out. It doesn't work that way. It needs to be, it needs to be multiplication in between them, and it needs to be the exact same thing in the parentheses if you wanted to cancel those out. So once we cancel those, you're left with x plus 3 over 4. However, we still have to go back to our original for stating our restrictions, and so we still need to state that x cannot equal 0, because if it would equal 0, we'd be divided by 0, and again, you can't do that. For the next one, I'm going to factor out a x squared out of the denominator. So if I take out an x squared out of both of those, I'd be left with x to the 3rd plus 4x. Actually, I'm going to take out another x. So I'm going to leave this as x to the 3rd, and then this would be x squared plus 4. And now looking here, again, you can do the subtraction or saying, okay, I have 2 x's on top, 3 on the bottom. 2 of those are going to cancel out 2 of those. And so you're left with, now because we got rid of everything that's in the numerator, we have to have a placeholder of a 1 up there. I only cancel out 2 of these x's, so I'm still going to have 1 left, and then I'm going to have x squared plus 4. And again, thinking about restrictions, x cannot equal 0. And if you're not sure what to do with this x squared plus 4, you can just set it equal to 0 to see if you have any restrictions. So I would subtract 4 on both sides, and I would have x squared equals negative 4, and then I would square root, and I'd say, okay, you can't square root of negative 4, so I know that that's my only restriction, and that would be your final answer. Looking at the next one, more factoring. If you factor the top, you get x times x plus 3. On the bottom, you're going to get x plus 3 and x plus 1. And now with the factoring, it also makes your life easier as far as finding the restrictions. So I see that now, because I have an x plus 3 on the top and bottom, and it's in parentheses, so it's being multiplied, I can cancel those out. And so my simplified version of this fraction would be x over x plus 1. However, without restrictions, we still need to go back to the original, and so this factored form really helps us, because now I can see x can't equal negative 3, because that would make this 0, and x can't equal negative 1, because that would make this 0. So I'm going to write that down. X cannot equal negative 3 or negative 1, and that would be our final answer there. Next one, again, factor out. This would factor to, the top part would factor to x plus 1 squared, and that's going to be divided by, factor out the 4 first, and then you'd be left with y plus 1, y minus 1. And so one of these y plus 1s is going to cancel out one of those y plus 1s on the top. Shift this over a little bit. And so you're left with, in the numerator, y plus 1. In the denominator, it's going to be 4 times y minus 1. And again, for our restrictions, we got to look back at the original. I see y can't equal plus or minus 1. So that right there would be your answer. And then for the last question here, I would take these one at a time. So what I do is I start with my numbers and then I start with my letters. So like when I look at the numbers, I'm going to simplify this first. That fraction reduces to 2/3. And now when I look at the x's, I have x to the negative 4 and x to the 2. So I would subtract those. So negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. So I'm going to put x to the 6 in the denominator. Looking at the y's, I have a y to the 1 on top, a y to the 0 on the bottom. 1 minus 0 is 1. So I'm going to have a y to the 1 on top. And then looking at the z's, I have a z to the 1 on the top, a z to the negative 3 on the bottom. 1 minus negative 3 is positive 4. And so I'll have a z to the 4th on the top. And then for our restrictions, you would say, let's write them off to the side a little further. We have to say x cannot equal 0 and z cannot equal 0. You don't have to worry about y, because even if y were to equal 0, 0 to the 0 power would still be 1. So that is all. I hope you found this helpful, and have a great day.